Hey, everybody, welcome back to Can I Have a Word, the podcast that explores language and its impact on our identity and the people we become. I am your host, Carl James. Um, I have a really interesting approach to this episode. This is actually going to be a two-part episode, and today is part one, and there will be another word for part two. So, today's word is reckoning. Now, a reckoning can be something that refers to the action or process of calculating or estimating something or a judgment or settlement of accounts. I know we've also heard it in other contexts. But for me, in my life, this particular reckoning was something quite personal. It was a series of moments that made me realize that the truth can no longer be avoided. And I had to deal with some aspects of my own identity that I hadn't fully confronted. And so that mostly refers to my sexuality. Now, I've mentioned before, um, I've known that I was gay since I was 5. And it was just something that was a part of me and I kind of kept to myself. And quite frankly, I thought that it would be something that would eventually go away, meaning I thought like this was maybe a phase I was going through. And I quite frankly kind of hoped that it was a phase because I knew that if it was something that was going to be a lifelong journey, that it would be complicated and I wasn't sure how I would do it. And I didn't necessarily have a model for how to do it. And so that was going to be my approach. And then when I got to college, I thought, this is something that may really be permanent. And so now I have to figure out how to deal with this. So, taking you back, I was at Duke. Um, that's where I went to college. And I really thought this was an opportunity to, kind of cultivate a new part of my identity. And, like every other freshman, you're excited to meet new people on campus. You're excited to sort of be independent and explore and take on new challenges and all those things. And I had that same level of excitement. But very early on, I realized that there were certain things that just weren't happening the way I wanted them to. So, for example, I had always been a great student. I was always, pretty good in school. I enjoyed learning, all of that. And at Duke, I was pre-med and I was taking, chemistry and math and I just wasn't doing well academically. It was harder than I remembered and I just remember feeling kind of like a fish out of water, which was weird because I had always excelled academically. In addition, I wasn't necessarily making friends as easily as I thought I would. I'm from the DC area. I went to a very diverse high school. I was friends with people across the rainbow, across the, spectrum, if you will, of orientation and everything else. And at Duke, things felt a lot more segregated, quite frankly. White folks did their thing, black folks were here, Asian folks did their thing, and I didn't even encounter any folks who were really LGBT. So, it was weird being in a space where I didn't necessarily have the same level of diversity at my disposal. And so, you're trying to navigate this new environment and you don't wanna make any waves, but you're trying to sort of establish yourself. And I was just struggling and it wasn't easy. And at first I thought, okay, maybe it's because I'm pre-med. Maybe I'm not supposed to be pre-med, but I still felt like I had an interest in health. So I decided to create a major. I was like, that's what I'll do. I'll create a major that's mine and that'll allow me to feel like I'm owning my education and then everything else will fall in line. And so I did that, and as part of my curriculum I incorporated a study abroad. And I quickly realized that the study abroad component was gonna be really important for me because as I entered my sophomore year, and even though I had this sort of new academic focus, things still weren't happening the way I wanted them to. I still felt kind of isolated, and I had some friends, but I also felt like there were these unspoken conflicts that I had with people, and I just didn't feel solid in who I was, and I felt like I needed to leave campus and maybe just take a break from Duke life and kind of encounter new people and new experiences in another part of the world. So, most people when they go abroad, they want to go to like Europe somewhere. They want to go, go to Spain, go to Greece, or you want to go to South America, someplace fun. I decided to go to Uganda. Now, this is not a choice that many people would make. There were a couple of reasons behind that decision. I was studying international health. I wanted to focus on HIV AIDS. And so it made sense to go there for that reason. But also, I'd always wanted to go to Africa because I always felt like I want to put my feet on the continent and I want to experience life there in some way, shape, or form. And I felt like doing it in a study abroad experience where I had a concentrated amount of time to live there, have new experiences, get to know people, I felt like that would be an opportunity that I wouldn't have later in life when you're busy working and, life is in full swing. So, Uganda it was. And it wasn't a Duke program, so it was also an opportunity to meet people that I would never be exposed to. So, the timing of this is interesting because now I'm going to date myself. I went abroad in the spring of 2002. 9/11 had just happened in the fall. And that was not a time where people wanted to be getting on planes and going to places. And I remember my parents having a lot of feelings about me leaving home and going abroad. And, the confidence of youth will say, I said, it'll be fine. I'm not worried about it. This is a great opportunity and I'm doing it. It was going to be my first trip abroad. So I was just excited and I really wanted to leave campus. So Uganda was happening. And I remember being on the plane and obviously it's a couple flights because, Uganda's far. And I remember at one point we were flying over the Sahara desert, and it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen to this day because it was like sunset and you could see this like golden sand just beneath you. And it was like picture perfect. And I was like, wow, I'm really flying over Africa now. And when we landed in Entebbe, Uganda, it was about 10 o'clock at night. It was pitch black. And, when we travel in the States, we're used to, you land in a city, you see the lights, you see, the terminal, and you're like, I'm in an airport. We landed in pitch black. There was nothing. You couldn't see anything. We got off the plane, walked on the tarmac, and then we just entered this building that looked very unassuming, least of all like an airport. And I remember seeing a bunch of like little tiny insects like gravitating toward the fluorescent light and they were just flying everywhere, and I was like, "Oh, what is this?" And I was like, "Oh, we're here now. Like, we're in a different place where everything is just gonna feel new." And I was like, "Well, there's no turning back now." And so the semester started. I got to know the people that I was now classmates with. They were from all over the country, and I actually turned 21 the 3rd day that I was there. I barely remember it, but apparently we all had a great time because stories about it to this day. But that was sort of it felt like a coming of age moment, if you will. And so Uganda really was this sort of capsule experience for me because there were so many things that I encountered. I stayed with a host family while I was there. And so I got to learn about the culture of this country through a family. I had 6 siblings. There were 2 cousins, mother, father. We didn't have running water, so I had to learn to bathe from a bucket. I had to use the bathroom in a pit latrine, so I would have to go outside and do my business over a hole in the ground. All of these things completely disrupted the comforts of growing up and living in the US in kind of the most beautiful way because it was at a time where I was looking for a sort of a rejuvenance, a kind of new awakening, and all of these new things that I was encountering were a part of that. And all of that to say, There were a lot of great moments, and then there were some not so great moments as well. I remember thinking about being a Black person in Uganda and feeling like I should have a feeling like I'm back home, like I've returned to the motherland. And I didn't necessarily feel that at first because it felt on a certain level, it felt really foreign to me. And I think this is something that I've heard a lot of people of color grapple with. Like you go back to the continent and you expect to have these feelings of like, oh, I'm arrived at in the motherland, and it's like this doesn't feel the way I thought it was going to feel. And it just took me a really long time to have those feelings because you're reconciling with a lot of things. In addition, I didn't go to Uganda to explore any aspect of my sexuality because, no secret, Uganda is not the most LGBT friendly country. As a matter of fact, it's pretty hostile. And so I knew that I wasn't going to be dealing with, or I wasn't planning to deal with my sexuality in Uganda at all. And so it's interesting that even in this kind of awakening that I'm having, I'm very clearly not dealing with one of the major parts of my identity. And it wasn't difficult for me to do that because it's a country where, that's really not accepted. Except there are social customs that kind of throw you off a little bit. So, for example, it is very common to see two men holding hands while they're walking and talking down the street. Like you'll just see that, but it's not sexual in any way, shape, or form. Now, in my very confused LGBT mind, it threw me off because I was like, I'm not supposed to be thinking about this, but now I'm seeing this with two men and they're holding hands, but it doesn't mean anything. And so there were little moments like that where I had to sort of like check my own sort of perspective about what I was experiencing. But overall, it was such an impactful semester, and, uh, I really loved the relationships that I was able to build and develop. And so, coming back to this idea of reckoning, I think oftentimes we can use it in this kind of a negative way where you're going to be dealing with something that is going to be hard or negative or make you feel some sort of angst. And that can be the case. But I think for me in this case, the reckoning was about coming to terms with who I was and who I wanted to become. I was settling my own accounts. I was settling my identities. And as I said, I wasn't specifically dealing with my sexuality intentionally at first. And so I finished the semester in Uganda feeling really good about what had happened to me there. Like I got what I came for. At the end of the semester, we were supposed to do a 2-week evaluation session in Rwanda. And that was going to be the end of my time in Africa. And so after Uganda, we then went to Rwanda. And it was there that I really had to, I'll say, bear witness to my full identity in terms of my sexuality. And so I'm going to pick up on that story in the next episode. And so I'm going to leave it here for now. This is the end of part one of our two-part episode. And yeah, there's definitely more to the story, which I will share in the next episode. So thank you for joining me. Please share your thoughts. Go to my website, carljamesspeaks.com. Let me know if you have any questions, thoughts you want to share. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Have a good one, y'all. Bye.